Welcome back for another Kerbal Space Program 2 video. In this video, we're going to go to Duna, and spoiler alert, yes, we do get there, and also spoiler alert, no, things do not go well. This video, though, I don't think there were any Kraken problems. That's what we call bugs in the Kerbal community, the Kraken. I think it was all my mistakes, either through piloting or when I designed this thing. And the biggest crux in this whole thing is that I was very optimistic about how much delta V I was going to need, and I didn't put in any for error. And as you'll see, it spirals out of control. Right now, I'm moving the combined spaceship into a higher orbit. I'm going to park it really high up so it's got some good speed going to it to start with before I even try to climb out of Kerbin's gravity well. And then I'm going to ditch the fuel module and I'm going to fly a fresh one up so I can leave with a full tank of hydrogen. I wasn't just optimistic with my delta V. That number down there actually does include the descent module, which I didn't figure it did because I'm burning the nuclear engine, which uses the hydrogen fuel. So why would it have the delta V in it for the whole other methalox fuel system? That's beyond me. But in either case, bad on me for not testing it. But you could say this was a test of sorts. It was a trial by fire. Right now I've drained the hydrogen tank, so I'm going to jettison it. But I've learned a lesson about design here, and the truss system I'm using, that's the metal bars above the fuel tank, if I had made it larger, that would have been best, because then you can build the fuel tank with its own thrusters on it and probe, so you can steer it up into that cavity and dock it. What I found through testing this big combined vehicle is that it needs a lot more thrusters if I'm going to be trying to hover over a tank and scoop it out of space. In fact, a lot of this mission was valuable lessons about combined spacecraft in KSP2. One of the biggest things being that the payload crew modules don't exactly work as you'd expect. Foreshadowing. Now I'm loading up a fresh fuel module so we can fly it up in rendezvous. Lessons learned here from the future. That entire module should just be a big fuel tank. The whole dumping a tank out of the truss, it's not worth the trouble. And honestly, I could have used the extra hydrogen. So in the next version of this that I send out, it's going to have a modified fuel tank system. I think this will be a profile for my next Duna mission and my other deep space missions. It seems to work pretty good to park the combined vessel really high up and then refuel it. It's a good way to get some extra delta V on top. The next time, though, this whole section will be its own fuel tank because I tried to dock it in there and I found that it was easier just to swap the whole section out. I, of course, also have to deal with if you undock something, it's going to forget how to be its own probe until you quick save and quick load. I can't wait till that gets fixed. The way to go seemed to be swapping out entire sections, and I think I'm going to do fuel sections docked to the sides of the spacecraft instead, so that I don't have to disassemble everything, just because it's tedious. It's almost painful to watch all this hard work, knowing how much it goes out of control later at the end of this. So this mission's definitely going to be at least a three-parter. If you'd like to see Phase 3 of this Duna program, give me a thumbs up down there. If you'd like this video, that'd be awesome. And if you're not subscribed, I would really appreciate a subscribe. So right now I'm putting the whole thing back together, and then I can get us to a transfer window, and we can head out to do this Duna thing that we're very optimistic for, and everything's going to be fine. In preparation for this trip, I was looking at delta V calculators and delta V maps and kind of crunching together what I needed. I really should have included a lot extra just because I rely very heavily on the alarm clock that they added to KSP1. And before that existed, I relied heavily on things like mechanical Jebediah, to plot out a transfer window. And I don't have that in KSP2, so I have to do this the old-fashioned way. And I even ended up asking my wife to pick up a protractor from the office supplies section when she was at the grocery store so that I can put it in front of my monitor and make sure that if you draw a line from Kerbin to the sun and put that as the bottom of the screen, that it's at the 45-degree mark, like in this picture here, to make our transfer. And it sounds very simple, but if you're used to having something just ding and tell you it's time to plant your maneuver, uh, yeah, I realize I'm very spoiled. Before we do anything irreversible, we're going to name a save file something that we can definitely find. I love that every time you quick save, it just has an additional save so you can scroll through them and go back to various states of time. It's super nice. I know some people try to avoid that, but this is a video game. I'm doing this for fun. Quick saves are going to save my life. Now I've plopped down a maneuver node and I've accelerated out of Kerbin's sphere of influence, and I'm just kind of tooling with it and dragging it around. I right-clicked on Duna to set it as a target, and then when you can make your trajectory cross with Duna, you should see encounters just like you would rendezvousing in orbit. So I'm going to update my before leaving quick save. And it's at this phase that I've made a critical mistake. Because I should be looking there for sphere of influence indicators, these little blue things that pop up, kind of like the one that's hovering over Kerbin right now that says I'm going to exit the sphere of influence. Just like that, I should be seeing those at Duna. And I don't. Because I have a close encounter with Duna, but I don't have an encounter. So I misread the encounter system. But thankfully I do fix it later, but it does cost me precious Delta V. So I decided to only give the nuclear engine about half thrust. It seems to be more stable that way. And as soon as I finished my maneuver, I noticed that, wait, I don't see any encounter with Duna here. But I was expecting to make some kind of course correction, just not this major of one. So I time warp out of Kerbin's sphere of influence, and once I'm orbiting the sun, I plop down a maneuver node, and I'm going to right-click on Duna and focus on Duna and mess around with that maneuver node until I can get a encounter that I'm happy with, and this time I'm going to watch it really close. So by tugging on the different directions on the maneuver node as I'm fine-tuning my close approach to Duna, I want to be passing it on the right-hand side so that I can be in a prograde orbit. And this is where I made another mistake, because here I wasn't sure which one of those was the uh, enter and exit of the sphere of influence. I kind of wish they were labeled, and maybe they are in some way, and I'm not noticing. But it'd be really cool if those big indicators had above it blinking enter, exit, like a street sign. So I performed a couple of course corrections until my encounter looked like what I thought was good. And then I time warped to the encounter, and I realized I was going to have to make another couple of course corrections, which isn't a big deal. It's just all these delta V costs are definitely stacking up on me. It's at this point that I started getting a little fuel cautious, and so I started using my RCS thrusters for the smaller burns, which actually worked really well. You know, I'm no game developer, so I have no idea what I'm asking, but it'd be sweet if in the fuel manager, if you could just tick a little box, and then if the box was ticked, whatever fuel tanks you pointed your mouse cursor at, it would just Command and Conquer style show a little green bar of how much juice is left. That would be really rad. After a couple course corrections to make sure I was going into a prograde orbit, now as I'm swinging by, I'm going to slow down and park this big thing. And as far as I know, everything's going great. And then I hear that horrible clanking sound, and I think, wait a second, I just had a ton of Delta V. What happened here? And I check out my fuel tanks, and I had them mixed up. I thought the big one was the little one was the big one. So I thought I had a ton of fuel, but actually I've got very little fuel. So I had to move it over. I guess I'd forgot to enable crossfeed. So all we can do really is burn retrograde and hope we can at least park into some kind of stable orbit. Thankfully, they're Kerbals, and it's not like they starve or run out of oxygen or anything like that, so they'll be comfy here. And I built this spaceship with a giant living area for just 4 people. Thankfully, we did end up in an orbit around Duna, so it makes the crew easier to rescue or refuel. Probably a combination of both. But yeah, that all that Delta V down there, that's my landing craft. I decided I might as well break the ship apart and shuffle all the pieces around and get rid of that drained fuel section because it's of no use to me. And I'm all the way out here with a lander. I might as well put boots on Duna. But before I can do that, I'm going to dock the nuclear section back to the crew section, and then I've got a tidy little return vehicle for whenever I can get around to refueling it. So switching back to my lander, I'm just going to burn retrograde and drop this thing down onto the surface. But something went wrong, and it seems to be burning the opposite way. I must have attached the probe core upside down. So thankfully now you can switch the direction of the control, so I'll just do that. So I had ditched the hydrogen tank that was attached to this, and I'd kind of forgotten about it. But since I'd burned in the wrong direction, it set me on a collision course with it. So I've done my retrograde burn, and I'm falling towards the surface. And I decided I'd play around a bit with the time warp while you're burning your engines. So I set myself to point at retrograde, and let's time warp. It actually works way better than you would think it would, and it's very stable. Not a bad way to do a landing, actually. Trying to keep that speed to the surface within control. Ooh. Yeah, it's a bit of a messy landing. Eesh. Hey, well, nothing broke, right? And now is that exciting moment where we're going to batten down the hatches, stick out our solar panels, get ready to do an EVA, or so I thought. But as I alluded to at the beginning of the video, the payload crew compartments seem to have this problem where you're trapped in there. There's no way to EVA that I can find anyway, and clicking on the door like KSP1 doesn't work, so those guys are trapped in there. And at this point I'm panicking about how to even share this with you guys on YouTube, and I decided that I'm just going to go for it. And this is how it went. This is what happened. And I've got a decision to make right now. And of course, I'm going to rescue these guys. So I tried an ascent just to see how the spacecraft would behave. And the air on Duna, I think it's a lot less forgiving in this version. And I definitely have too much engine power and not quite enough fuel. So I reloaded my save on the ground, but I thought about the rescue program, and because those guys are trapped in there, it makes the recovery really tedious because I'll need to bring a giant docking port to the surface to remove them from that tin can, which it just seems really dumb to me. So I'm going to quick load back to when they were in orbit before I landed, but now I've learned things about the lander. We'll just say it was a simulation. And next episode, I'll be flying a rescue mission out. Thankfully, they're all safe there with the power of quick saving and quick loading. And yeah, the mission the whole time was just to go live there in the orbit of Duna for probably like 8 years. That was the idea all the time. Yep, everything's fine here. In all seriousness, though, I'm going to be able to make a much better combined vehicle to come rescue them, and a much better lander. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Kind of a weird one this week. I definitely made some major design problems, but I've learned a lot from that, and I'm confident that the next mission will not only be able to rescue the crew, but I'll be able to achieve that vehicle I was dreaming of to go to and from Duna. So, again, I'd really appreciate a like if you haven't already liked the video, and if you've watched this long, why not subscribe? Catch you next time in Duna Phase 3, The Rescue.